Hi, my name is Colton Davidson. I work with OEM Products, and today we're going to be showing you how we go over a Hurricane floor scraper machine when it comes in for maintenance. So we recommend doing a really thorough inspection every couple months, especially if the machine has been hard at work. What we've done here is, and what we recommend doing is just taking the time to pull those weights off, pull the weight covers, the weights off, get them out of the way. And we recommend going ahead and pressure washing the machine as best you can. And that's what we've already done here. So let's get started. Okay, so the first step before we get the engine fired up, we'll start doing some tests and making sure that this is ready to go. I'd like to make sure to check that there is oil in the engine, that the oil levels at where we want it. So let's just go ahead and we'll pull the dipstick and give it a check. In there we can see it is full. So I'll go ahead and wipe it. We'll stick it back in and we'll be ready to go ahead and fire it up and do some tests. Okay, so we've had the engine running for about 10 minutes or so. Everything's warmed up, that oil's flowing through real nice. So what we're gonna do is, it's a really good opportunity because we have all the weights off, like I said earlier, to go ahead and just kind of give the hydraulic pump a good old leak check and just check all these different connections. So what I like to do is get in here. You can go through righty tighty, lefty loosey, make sure that these are all nice and tight. You can kind of just visually look at them. It should be pretty apparent pretty quickly if any of these are loose or not. You'll see a lot of oil dripping down. All of these should either be a 7/8 or a 9/16 or an 11/16, something like that. You can go through and just kind of check if you really want to get nice and thorough and just go through and start checking connections, making sure that they're good. It'll be pretty apparent if you've got a leak whenever you did your pressure wash. And you can go through, it should be pretty quick, apparent where it is, where it's coming from. And then doing this after you've cleaned it will help you identify what area it's coming from. So going through, just checking all these different connections. So that one should be an 11/16. Going through, checking, yep, that's nice and tight. And looking for anything that could be rubbing on any connections. So manipulate the controls, just look and make sure. We've got some hose clamps here that could be loose, so just checking on those, making sure that they're nice and tight. Lots of things to check here, but just giving it a good old once over is a really, really good idea. While we're here, we can check that this cotter pin and this is the tilt cylinder, it's in there, it's good and it's tight. These connections are good. I'm not able to move any of this. I think this area is good to go. Okay, so now that we've done that leak check, we've checked behind those tires for there's no debris. We can start kind of moving around the machine, going through part by part and making sure everything's ready to go. So right now I tilted the blade all the way forward and we'll start checking over this area. So we always want to check. We want to check to make sure that these bolts that hold this lift cylinder to this bracket are tight. So we'll give them a good check. We'll also check the condition of this caster. This is a brand new caster. It looks really good. This bolt is tight. That looks good. So next we want to check that the hoses that go to the lift cylinder are tight. So we'll take a 9/16 and just give them a little touch, make sure that they're nice and tight, and they are. Should be pretty apparent though if they were leaking. We also, lastly, this is something that happens a lot, is we want to check and make sure that there is a cotter pin in the back of this pin. And there is. So obviously we'll check for the same thing on the other side. The other thing we want to check when we're up here, there's a cotter pin in this tilt cylinder right here. We want to check that we've got cotter pins in this pin that attaches the blade bar to the actual frame of the machine. And this would be a great opportunity if we needed to. We could go ahead and grease the blade bar. That's something that we see not very many people actually do. And then lastly, there's this collar that holds the blade bar in position. And we want to make sure that one has a bolt, and on the back side that there is a nut holding it in place. So that all looks pretty good. I think we're ready to move on to the next area. Okay, so for this next part, what we're going to do is, it's often overlooked, but we want to check out the seat condition, the seat brackets, that everything's holding it in place is correct. So oftentimes you want to go through and kind of check these bolts here to make sure they're all tight. We'll go ahead and we'll flip it, and as it's in that position, kind of give it a wiggle, see if it's coming up, if it's starting to come loose. And then if it is, usually the culprit is one of these 4 here. You can get those tight, and that usually fixes it right up. Okay, so next what we're gonna do is we're gonna check out the hydraulic valve, the filter, make sure all of these different connections are tight, that they're good, there's no leaks. So you can go through and you can check each of these different connections here. That's a 9/16, and check those, make sure there's no, you should be able to see visually if there's any leaks, but it's not always a good idea to give them just a quick little turn. You can check out the hydraulic filter, make sure that it is, that the hour limitation has not been exceeded. You can check and see when it was last changed and make a decision on if you need to actually change it. This one right here was changed in August of 2023. It is still good. It's a good idea to check out each of these different hose clamps, make sure that those are all good, make sure that your lid is sealed on nice and tight. And that should be all you really need to look at for the hydraulics up here. Oh, you can also check and make sure the stick isn't all loose and wobbly. This is about the right wiggle it's supposed to have. If you need to tighten it up, you can tighten it up here with a 1/2 inch or 7/16 wrench. If it still wiggles, you can lift up this boot and go through and check the bolts there, make sure that they're tight. While we're here, you also want to check and make sure that the choke will actually return after you've engaged it. So what I mean by that is you can pull it and it goes right back into its neutral position. So that is also working good. It's operating smoothly. That is what we want. It's looking good. So I think we can move on to the next phase now. So next what we're gonna do is we're gonna check the steering controls, make sure that everything's tight and good up there. You can typically grab it, kind of give it a wiggle, make sure it's good. This is the right amount of wiggle, but we've gotten them in here and there's just all kinds of slop in the controls. So the typical culprit is that something inside of this mechanism right here has come loose. So what we'll do is we'll take a 5/16 socket, we'll take off this hose clamp, we'll lift up this boot, and we'll give it a check. So we'll just, with a 7/16, we'll come in here and we'll just give it a quick little turn, make sure everything's nice and tight. And that is all looking tight in there. Normally it'll be pretty apparent which one of these is not tight, and it'll be all kind of all over the place. But just go through and you give those a tight, but we're gonna give it a check. That all looks really good. The operation's looking smooth, looking really good. And then we'll just go ahead and we'll put it back together. All right, so for this next phase, what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at some of the problem areas that we've seen that come up on the engine, but people just kind of miss. And we'll start off with the oil drain hose, making sure that this cap is on and it's tight. If you suspect it's not, it's really easy to grab some mint wrenches and just verify. But it looks good here. Moving on up to the engine oil filter, we can kind of make sure it's not loose. It'd be pretty apparent. We've seen oil dripping. If there's a lot of debris, oily crap underneath here, you probably have a leak coming from your oil filter because it's just not tight enough. It's a good time to also just check the operation of your belt tensioner, making sure it's good. And this one does feel right. Those look tight. The different bolts look tight in that assembly. It's also a good time to give these belts a check. They feel nice and tight. They feel good. You can get a flashlight check for any cracks in the belts. You want to make sure that this fan is actually extremely important for cooling. It's a really good, it really helps facilitate cooling the engine, making sure that's got fans, there's no rags caught up in it, anything like that. And then finally, we'll come up here and check this air filter. It's really easy to check. We'll just pull this cap off. I recommend changing the air filter every about 20 hours, maybe more if you're working in an extremely dusty environment. This is critical for protecting the engine health, for keeping the emissions down, and just overall health of the machine. So you want to make sure that, one, that the filter looks clean. This is a brand new air filter, so it's going to look very, very pristine. You want to make sure this is tight. And then you also want to make sure that this cap is sealed, has a really good seal on this rubber here. of the actual air filter. And that all looks really good. So we'll go ahead and we'll put this back together and we'll move on to the next part. Okay, so we're kind of coming to an end of this. What we're going to be doing for this last little phase here is we're checking the other side of the engine. Some gotchas that we could see here typically is that this battery holder is not on and secured. You want to make sure that the hooks are into their positions on the frame, that these nuts are tight. And then from there, you want to check to make sure that the battery connections are all good. So as you want to grab them, give them a quick little wiggle, both on the actual terminals of the battery and then where they connect. So right here on the alternator, and then this one just goes to the frame, and you want to just kind of make sure that it's not coming loose there. It's a good opportunity to check and make sure that the throttle cable's on and good. You can look at all this linkages, all the different springs and things, just kind of looking to make sure things are still there. And then while you're on this side, if you didn't already, check this side for leaks from either the engine or from down below the deck for the hydraulic. It's a good time to kind of give that a look. You can come over here and see, also kind of get a second look at those belts from a different angle. We're also gonna let's just check that belt tensioner pulley. So let me pull, we'll pull this tensioner out. Pull the tension out of it is what I meant. And then we'll come back around and we'll make sure that it's spinning freely and it's not making any squeaks or anything. And yeah, that feels pretty good. It's also a good time to check and make sure if you have a battery tester to make sure you're getting at least 12 volts out of your battery. Make sure you're getting the 350 cold cranking amps that you're supposed to be getting. And then if the engine's running, it's a good time to just check and make sure that the alternator is charging that battery. You should see around 13.8, 0.5 volts or so on that. That should be it for this side of the machine. That just about does it for our monthly or so inspection on the Hurricane Ride-On Floor Scraper from OEM Products. You should be ready to throw those weights back on it and get back to scraping. If you learned something new, if you would like a deeper dive in a specific part of the machine, make sure to leave us a comment in this video, and we'll try to do our best to get it out to you. Thanks.